A small town, that's how many describe the city of South Bend.
I know just about everybody on this block.
Even with a head count of more than 100,000, it's a city that started as a hot spot for fur traders.
This part of Indiana was so important.
And blossomed
My mom and I always catching the bus and going shopping in downtown South Bend.
into something much bigger as more people discovered what this area really could become.
Anyone can tell you that South Bend's been through quite a few changes.
Through 15 decades, we've watched the city grow from a small town into a bustling hub.
We've witnessed the bright days of Studebaker and the dark days when it closed down.
I think you have a new generation of leaders stepping up.
The hand-in-hand effort of trying to rebuild a 21st century city.
Not just high hopes, but high expectations.
A lot has happened in 150 years.
My hope is that we continue to see progress.
And it's all been leading up to what could be the biggest party
SB150
in South Bend's history. Tonight, ABC 57 News is honored to share the story of how this community was able to persevere.
Our special live broadcast celebrating South Bend's past, present, and future starts right now.
Live from Michiana, this is ABC 57 News at 5.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Dorman. We are so excited to celebrate South Bend tonight during our special live broadcast from downtown South Bend for SB150. My co-anchor Colleen Borman and Chief Meteorologist Tom Coombs are live downtown. Hey guys.
Brian, it is perfect out here, the perfect day. Of course, like you mentioned earlier, we are in the perfect location right across from the East Race.
Yeah, we're down here on Niles Avenue. You can see the East Race Century Center downtown behind us, and this place is transformed. We've got exhibits talking about the history of South Bend. Over on Jefferson Boulevard, there's basketball courts. In Howard Park, there's inflatables, fun for the kids, fun for everyone. We are ready to celebrate. Happy birthday, South Bend.
Happy birthday, South Bend, indeed. And to celebrate, we have reporters all across South Bend today for SB150 celebrations. We have Marissa Keniston, Bridget Matter, Kaylu Bourgeois, and Rachel Brown. Of course, we'll bring you live reports highlighting South Bend's past, present, and future throughout the next 90 minutes of news. Even before the city was incorporated, of course, the land, it is sacred, playing a pivotal role in the pursuit of freedom and justice.
Yeah, a secret network known as the Underground Railroad, working during the 1800s to bring slaves through here, through this area, what is now known as South Bend, was an important part of that journey.
And ABC 57's Rachel Brown, of course, is live for us today inside the St. Joseph County role in the passage to freedom.
Yeah, Colleen, Tom, I'm told free blacks and local abolitionists here in St. Joseph County played a critical role in leading these slaves to freedom, even protecting these slaves when their owners would come north to apprehend them.
These fugitive slaves who were heading towards Canada disappeared as if they were on an underground railroad. And that's how it got its name.
But the Underground Railroad was actually a loose connection of trails and passages, a network of free blacks and abolitionists all working to help slaves escape the heinous institution of slavery to gain freedom in northern states or Canada.
It is estimated about 1,500 or a little more came through this area.
Beginning around 1830 and leading up to the Civil War in 1861, St. Joseph County played a critical role in this process. During those years, free blacks and local abolitionists housed slaves and even used book clubs and barbershops to secretly collect money for Underground Railroad efforts.
What makes St. Joseph County, Indiana so involved is that we did border Cass County, Michigan, and that, for one reason and another, many times the slaves would not go into Canada. They felt safe enough to settle in Cass County.
And in 1849, when a Kentucky slave owner attempted to recapture a number of slaves in Cass County, folks in St. Joseph County rallied.
A crowd quickly surrounded them. They would not let the Southerners, the owners, take them back.
Unfortunately, today, the physical traces of this chapter in our history are far gone. Most of the homes known to have housed slaves have been torn down over the years, and there is little written evidence because of the severe consequences abolitionists face for transporting slaves.
Abolition families really caught a lot of flack, to use a modern term, for being abolitionists. And it wasn't seen as a heroic activity. It was seen as, okay, you're following your conscience, but you are also just pushing us closer to the edge.
And the exact number of slaves who were able to find freedom using the Underground Railroad isn't known. Actually, only a small fraction of slaves were ever able to escape. And in 1865, when slavery was abolished here in the United States, South Bend was officially incorporated as a city. Live in downtown South Bend, Rachel Brown, ABC 57 News.
Right, very interesting story, Rachel, and a very important part of South Bend's history.
Absolutely.
All right, now let's fast forward almost 200 years. You may notice now South Bend is trying to make itself a green city, and you may notice that there's some farm to fork restaurants starting to pop up here.
And Tom, a local woman, she's trying to change the face of her neighborhood, of her childhood neighborhood, and that's where we find ABC 57's Kaylee Bourgeois. She's live on Michigan Street for us to tell us about the farm behind the South Bend's most popular farm-to-table destination.
Well, Colleen, have you ever really asked yourself, where does your food come from? Where'd they grow that onion? Or where did they pick the herbs that taste so delicious? One South Bend woman is hoping that it's from one of her gardens on the city's west side.
This is LaSalle Grill. It's an upscale downtown South Bend restaurant that's adapting to the shifting tastes of the market.
The farm-to-table movement has really gained some steam in the past few years.
So where does LaSalle Grill get the bulk of its produce? The west side of South Bend.
Farm to table means, to me, farm to fork.
About 3 miles from the grill in this neighborhood just off Western Avenue, there's a series of small gardens that are providing bites to some of South Bend's most popular eateries, from LaSalle Grill to Fiddler's Hearth.
I grew up right in this neighborhood.
This is Judith Rubleski. The granddaughter of Polish immigrants, she was raised on Dundee Street.
Used to be a pretty crummy block.
And she wanted to change that.
Old mattresses and dirty diapers and all kinds of alcohol beverage bottles.
So she used her favorite hobby,
I always wanted to garden,
to inspire and clean up her neighborhood.
What's happened with Farm to Table here is this street is, look how nice and clean it is.
Rubleski started Kankakee Wetland Organic Gardens 11 years ago. It started as one garden and has grown to 7 members-owned shared plots, all within a few blocks of each other. And as the plants grew taller, the neighbors grew closer.
Everybody's taking care of their properties.
Judith says she's seen the neighborhood go from unsightly and dangerous to beautiful and friendly.
Do you know your neighbors? I know a lot of neighbors around here now.
And while she sells 1/3 of her garden's products to businesses, she also donates 1/3 to local nonprofits.
Farm to table is for everybody, not just when you eat at a restaurant.
And her paying customers are willing to go the extra mile to buy locally.
Ultimately, it's a legwork on the restaurant's part. I mean, it's always easy to buy from corporations.
To keep their local economy and bellies full of the good stuff.
You know your money stays local, and you can put a face to the lady or gentleman who's actually farming it.
Together, they're working to further the organic, local food movement in South Bend.
It's not hard to find a place to eat or drink here in South Bend, downtown South Bend. You know, some of these restaurants, they've been around for a while. Others, they're just settling in.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little hungry now. That's the dinner hour. ABC 57's Bridget Matter is looking at some of South Bend's oldest and newest spots.
I stopped into 2 of South Bend's mainstays, Kitchenette and Sunny Italy Cafe, both unique in their own way, and both have actually been in the city for over 50 years, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Within those brick walls on Niles Ave lies decades and decades of family history and tradition.
My mother grew up next door to the restaurant and had a fondness for this little place.
Sis Bamber Elliott tells me her mother Josephine fell in love with the Italian place that first opened in 1926. Josephine was just 16 years old.
She came next door to Sunny Italy to cut bread for 5 cents a day.
Little did Josephine know the place where she made just a nickel a day would later become her restaurant.
So my mother asked my dad, could they purchase the little restaurant on Niles Avenue?
And since then, not much has changed.
So it's been in our family since 1940.
Taking a step inside the kitchen is like taking a step back in time. Much of it's still the same since the Bamber family remodeled the restaurant nearly 75 years ago. And the food, as you can expect from the oldest Italian restaurant in South Bend, is authentic Italian cuisine.
Everything is homemade, from the salad dressings to the hand-rolled meatballs. to all the sauces.
And less than 3 miles away on Michigan Street, a very different taste of South Bend.
Omelets and burger. They're big on the omelets and burgers.
Kathy Murtis, a manager at Kitchenette, knows her way around this kitchen that opened its doors in 1960.
I like to cook.
And she's been serving up those omelets and burgers for decades.
30 years in September.
It's a spot she says is near and dear to her.
We have a lot of customers that do for us because they are like family.
And she has one frequent customer with unique ties to the place.
One of my first jobs, I was a dishwasher, when I was younger.
Jake Narkowitz's grandfather owns Kitchenette, so of course he dined here as a kid and still finds himself sitting in those same seats today.
I just always remember coming here to eat, with the family all the time. There's a lot of memories here.
A familiarity that he and other customers enjoy with each cup of joe until the next time they come back for more.
Coming up, I'll take you into one of South Bend's newest restaurants and the story behind how it started. Reporting live in South Bend, Bridget Matter, ABC 57 News.
Colleen, we've moved away from South Bend for a period of time, but when people ask, where are we from, I say South Bend.
Right here.
Right here. I'm a proud Washington High School graduate, go Panthers, and my South Bend roots run deep. My South Bend roots start over 100 years ago with my grandparents. My grandfather, Edward Coombs, was born in Louisville, went to Cathedral High School in Indianapolis, and came to South Bend, like many have for the first time, to attend the University of Notre Dame in 1927.
I am Marty Coombs-Gill. I am your aunt.
My grandmother's roots are not as well known.
From what I understand in talking to her adopted sister, Aunt Ethel, somehow they went to the orphanage that your grandmother, my mother, was at in Marion, Indiana. And at that time, she was probably 5 or 6, from what I can remember. And they just went to the orphanage and picked her out and took her home with them. At that time, you didn't have to, go through legal channels or anything. I think they just wanted to get kids into their into homes. Her sister Ethel married, so they moved to their house on Notre Dame Avenue.
Marie Skinner lived in a house that's no longer on a much-changed Notre Dame Avenue and attended South Bend Central High School, a building that's now apartments.
There were like 3 girls living in Aunt Ethel's house. She kind of ran a little boarding house. And I know one of the other girls in the house, Betty, met another student at Notre Dame, and I think she might have met your grandfather through Betty. But there was a Notre Dame connection there.
Ed and Marie were married August 7, 1940 at St. Joseph Parish, downtown South Bend. That church was demolished and a newer building built in 1965. My grandfather's career was in academia, a bachelor's in electrical engineering, a master's in math from Notre Dame, and a PhD in physics from MIT. The honeymoon years in South Bend were short. 1941, the U.S. entered World War II, and by 1942, Ed and Marie and their first daughter Jane moved to Boston for work at MIT for research and technology development for the war effort. At the end of the war, the family moved back to South Bend, but moving back wasn't so easy.
From what I recall, I don't know if there were a lot of houses, or I don't know if they were panicking because they had 3 kids and they needed to get back so he could start working at Notre Dame within a certain amount of time. So they just got the house sight unseen.
The family moved into the house on Johnson Street, grew by 2 more children for a total of 5, all whom attended Holy Cross School and then St. Joseph High School. The new high school recently moved closer to downtown.
I can remember my mom and I always catching the bus and going shopping in downtown South Bend. Our biggest thing was to go to Kresge's and have hot dogs and then buy trinkets or whatever. They had movie theaters down there. I always remember the big clock on I believe it was on the corner of Washington.
My grandfather retired in 1974 from Notre Dame after 42 years of teaching and research, a long resume that included building the first particle accelerator on campus. The most recent version was installed on campus in 2012. Ed and Marie celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1991. Grandpa died in March of '92. Grandma a few years later in 1995. They are lived on by 9 grandchildren and now 8 great-grandchildren.
How cool was that? Tom, did you have a lot of fun kind of taking a look back and interviewing some family members?
You know, I really knew the stories, but putting on a timeline is great. Thank you, Aunt Marty, for being a great interview.
Great job.
Interesting facts, though. The technology my grandfather worked on in World War II at MIT, radar. He helped develop radar technology, something that I now use today in my job. It's great having that kind of connection. And my grandmother, who was a saint, was also a card shark. She teach me everything from Go Fish to Canasta.
That's great. And Tom, you got to give a shout out to your high school. I'm giving a quick shout out to Marion High School. Go Knights. Just to be fair. Brian, back to you.
All right, Colleen, Tom, thank you for that story, Tom, by the way. Now for some fun, fast facts about one of South Bend's most recognizable buildings. Of course, we're talking about the Morris Performing Arts Center, downtown South Bend. Let's head out to ABC 57's Marissa Kinniston, who is live in front of the historic landmark. Marissa, tell us a little bit about the history of that space.
Brian, this building behind me is full of history. It's been through several name changes since it first opened back in the 1920s. Back then, it was called the Palace Theater. It was a popular place for vaudeville performers. Through the years, the space has been through a lot of ups and downs, even struggling to stay open at one point during the 50s. But today, it remains strong, hosting several national acts every year.
The 99th Indianapolis 500 kicks off this weekend. The race carries with it a rich history in itself, one that includes a former South Bend auto giant. ABC 57's Brandon Pope gearing up for our special coverage of the race. Brandon, what'd you find out for us, buddy?
Hey, Brian. Well, we took a look at the Indianapolis 500 Museum and tried to check out their Studebaker vehicles. Now, as Rachel just mentioned, and as you well know, Studebaker had a major impact on the city of South Bend in the mid-60s before it closed its operations. But its a storied history remains here at the Speedway. Here at the Indianapolis 500, South Bend history is intertwined with the race's legacy of champions in the form of two cars, an STP Lotus and a Novi.
Quite magical things about them.
Back in 1961, South Bend automaker Studebaker made a championship sweep, acquiring STP, then owned by Hall of Famer Andy Granatelli. It also made an investment in Novi vehicles. The Michiana racers are recognized by car enthusiasts from around the country.
Yeah, the Studebakers seem to be a little more like functional looking, a little more boxy.
The 1968 STP Lotus clocked in at more than 160 miles per hour, innovative for its time.
You see a lot more aerodynamics and ground effects built into the cars.
And the Novis were a crowd favorite in the 40s. It's a front-engine car, one of the last of its kind.
Very impressive. I would wonder what this kind of a car would be worth right now.
For Peter McKinder, a race fan from the east coast of England, the warm memories of Studebaker cars are priceless.
Studebaker did stick in my mind because many years ago, when we used to collect die-cast models, one of my first memories was of a lovely Studebaker Golden Hawk.
And even though production in South Bend stopped in 1963, the brand still has power.
You see families sometimes owning a Studebaker. Yeah, pretty classic car brand.
Classic indeed. It's really great to see how well known the brand still is and the impact it's had on people, not just here in South Bend or Indiana or in the country, but also in the UK and places like that around the world. Now, the museum tells me that people request to see Studebakers all the time. However, all the Studebaker models they have right now are in storage. However, they say they will unveil them soon for anyone who wants to see them. I'm live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Brandon Pope, ABC 57 News.
Let's hand it back out now to Tom and Colleen downtown South Bend tonight.
All right, thanks, Brian. The past 2 days, we spent time with former mayors of South Bend going through the legacy that they've left behind.
And I sat down with Mayor Pete Buttigieg to talk about his time as mayor and his hope for the future.
I think you have a new generation of leaders stepping up across our community.
According to South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, it's the perfect time to be mayor.
You know, I love my timing. I think we're living in the middle of what's going to go down in history as one of the most vital, transformative decades in the life of our city. You just think about how much has happened in a pretty short amount of time.
He calls it a transformative decade, specifically because of the high-tech companies that now call South Bend home.
I think we've really gotten out of that mode of just kind of waiting for Studebaker and have begun imagining new economic possibilities for the city. And those possibilities are often in industries that didn't even exist when I was growing up here. You know, you got data centers and nanotech.
Since taking office in 2011, Mayor Pete Buttigieg had a lot of goals in mind. Top on the list, addressing the issues of abandoned homes and buildings. Born was the 1,000 Properties in 1,000 Days initiative.
Seeing a lot of neighborhoods turn the corner, seeing a lot of those older crumbling properties either getting fixed up or getting torn down, I think that's going to go down as one of the most important things that happened in our city in these years.
And as he reflects on his time as mayor, he hopes the momentum continues and he plans to be here for the next big anniversary.
I'm hoping to be on hand for the 200th anniversary, and I hope as we look back in these years, we're able to say, you know, these were the years when South Bend really got back in the saddle and was moving forward faster.
And this weekend, Mayor Buttigieg says there's more to celebrate than a birthday.
It's about more than a milestone. It's about the comeback of our great community.
Through the past 150 years, of course, in downtown South Bend and throughout South Bend, buildings have changed, people have changed, the economy has changed, and you can see those changes right now at a special exhibit at the History Museum.
Yeah, ABC 57's Marissa Kinnison took this historic tour, and Marissa, tell us about it.
Well, the exhibit is called South Bend Then and Now, and it features historic photos of South Bend contrasted with their current views. I was able to talk with the director of education at the museum, and he said even though the exhibit is about the then and now, some things in South Bend never change.
This part of Indiana was so important, especially during the industrial age.
Much of South Bend's development revolved around the industrial factories, with large companies like Studebaker, Singer Sewing, Bendix, and Honeywell. The area boomed in the 19th century, and it was mainly because of the St. Joseph River that provided power to all of the factories.
I've always ventured to say if the river was not here, South Bend would be just another soybean, corn, and pig producing area of the state.
There was so much growth and prosperity, this area became one of the leading industrial giants during the early 19th century.
So between the 1830s and after the post-Civil War, South Bend exploded.
But when the river ran its course, so to speak, railroads took its place. And when technology continued to move on, so did the factories.
Companies that had been around for hundreds of years eventually die off because of the competition from foreign markets.
But now, over 100 years later, there's a new giant in town. And this time, it's not so big. South Bend has recently put more focus on small businesses.
You know, that those people live here and that the money that you spend is going back to the same local economy.
Like this startup.
Like they would start with the shapes.
Called Make South Bend.
I think a lot of people are maybe getting the encouragement they need to start a new business.
Fitzgerald says she's received a lot of support from the city for starting her small business, whether it's been through financial assistance or just with support groups.
A really supportive, collaborative community to be a part of.
So just like the young entrepreneurs who came to South Bend in the early 19th century looking for a better life, South Bend still hopes to create that same dream for entrepreneurs now. Historians say they hope a revival of sorts will be created in the city.
We're hoping that somebody in my position 100 years from now will be able to see as much good growth and hype as the heyday of where everybody wanted to come to South Bend to work for Oliver, Studebaker, Bendix.
The exhibit South Bend Then and Now lasts through the end of the month. Reporting live in downtown South Bend, Marissa Kinnison, ABC 57 News.
ABC 57's Bridget Matter spoke with a descendant of one of South Bend's first African-American families.
The History Museum in South Bend welcomes you to step into yesterday.
One of the first black families in South Bend.
On this wall, old portraits dating back to the 1800s, but to John Charles Bryant, these pictures mean so much more.
My mother's father worked at Studebaker's.
His family tree.
My father was a head waiter at the LaSalle Hotel.
The Bryant-Powell family came to Indiana to escape the South, leaving Virginia and the Carolinas.
If you were a free black, you had to leave those states. Otherwise, you would become an indentured slave. Our family left in the 1830s, and they settled in Spencer, Indiana.
Then about 25 years later, they moved to South Bend, where Bryant has been most of his life. His father working the tables at the old LaSalle Hotel, and his mother, Georgia Bryant, donating her time.
She was the church organist at Olivet.
It was here at South Bend's first African-American church where Georgia Bryant played the organ for 42 years.
Bryant says South Bend has been good to him.
Be proud of your heritage.
And he will always cherish the memories. In South Bend, Bridget Matter, ABC 57 News.
It is a big night. A huge festival of lights will be transformed into the St. Joseph River.
Yeah, that's right. The Century Center's Island Park Pavilion, home to all of the lights, camera, and action completely under a sea of blue light. ABC 57's executive producer Kyle Phoebe takes us inside the rehearsal for that event.
So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to try to run through all of the various pieces of this fairly elaborate hour of events. We will need a mic. I think we're looking for a lot of pizzazz.
This is a celebration planned by the community and made possible by the community for the community.
It's all about light. The entire evening is about light, the gathering of light, and then the deploying of the river lights as the big present to South Bend.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Oh
like
yeah.
You want it to
oh
be
yeah.
really,
I want some pop,
really
some pop, wow, and zing. Yeah.
This has been a celebration a year and a half in the making. Really 150 years in the making.
We are 10 minutes into the procession of the Pokagon Band.
It's a great feeling to come here, and on my part, just to represent the Pokagon Band of the Potawatomi Indian, because those are my ancestors.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Stan Morsaw, and I'm going to be your MC for this evening's program.
The river has been a constant in our community throughout all our periods of development.
Here we have this river that is flowing in front of me. These are the same waters that our ancestors used to traverse from one area to another.
Voice of God, Mike, live.
The South Bend Brass Quintet presents Celebration South Bend.
We feel good about all of the elements that we put in place. I think it'll be really exciting for everybody.
It's a little overwhelming to see all the support that the community has been pouring onto this event and this year-long celebration.
We want to escort them to the end of the bridge. It's always very exciting to see something that you've imagined in your mind. Thank you. We're going to hold right now and sketched out on pieces of paper finally come to fruition.
Join us now in the countdown to the ignition of the comet that will set our river ablaze with light.
It's a privilege to be able to work with this project and to be able to do something that I think will be really exciting for everybody in the community.
10, 9, 8.
We've been talking about, the city in kind of 50-year chunks, and this is going to start us on a new course for many years to come.
7, 6, 5, 4. To be out here, the weather's going to be great. It will be a lot of fun.
3, 2, 1.
We're only going to do this once. This is your only shot to see South Bend River lights. I would say it's an experience not to miss.
Again, the River Light unveiling is 9:30 tonight. Before we go, we want to do a special thank you to the History Museum of South Bend for allowing us to use their historical photos throughout this entire newscast.
And a thank you to Dave Matthews for this great venue to show you the events from downtown South Bend.
And again, thank you for joining us on this special broadcast. I'm Colleen Borman.
I'm Tom Coombs. Let's celebrate South Bend's 150th birthday.